Baba Namo Ki Varam. Baba Namo Ki Varam. Baba Namo Ki Varam. Okay, Namaskar, welcome to the study group. So tonight's topic is Kosha. So Kosa means the layers of the mind. We have 5 layers of the mind. And I'm basically, the purpose of the study group is, of course, just to get together and do some meditation and share, but also so that you understand how to study the books of Annamarga, which are presented in meditation steps. Some of the books are very easy, like Andavachanamritam and Baba's Grace, etc. But some of the books are a bit hard to read, but there are some complementary books. And so one of the most difficult book is called Idea and Ideology. And it's a great book. It gives an overview of the philosophy, but the language is full of Sanskrit, and it's very dense. And it was one of the first 2 books that was written by Sri Shanamurti. And the way this book was written was also very special because he had a habit to go for evening walks after his work. He was working in the railway department, in the railway headquarters in India as an accountant. And so after his work, he would go for a walk. And so the walk, he would go to a place where a tiger and an Englishman had fought, and both of them died. And so there was a grave of the tiger and the grave of the Englishman. And so he would sit on the grave of the tiger, which was like a nice platform for meditation. And then he would discuss about anything and everything and have personal time with his disciples. And so now what he started doing was that somebody would bring a candle along and then he would give dictation. And that's how this book was written, Idea and Ideology. It was done by candlelight in the evening on the tiger's grave in Jamalpur. And so it was dictated by him, and disciples would write it down, and then they would, clean up the manuscript, and then he would edit it and proofread before publishing. And so it's a unique book, and it's discussing about cosmology, how the universe is created, what we are, who we are, where are we going, and it's a very, very interesting book. So I will then let's go for the text. So we'll read a little bit of the text, and then I'll try to explain it. And then I'll show you some reference books as well, which are very helpful to understand this type of topics. So it's not like a normal, I sometimes do PowerPoint presentations, but today I'm just going to go straight for the text. So this is published in Idea and Ideology, and also in some other books. Annamarga Philosophy in a Nutshell is available print on demand. Okay, so we normally take turns to read, and so those who have a computer and can read, you can read a couple of paragraphs if that's okay. And so maybe Everson, do you have a computer in front of you or a mobile?
I have a computer.
Okay, great. Yeah, so maybe you can read the first 2 paragraphs.
Sure.
Thank you.
Consciousness is the supreme subjectivity, and all other mundane subjectivities or objectivities are mere blendings of the absolute subjectivity. Therefore, the mind is not an absolute entity either, but a transformed state of consciousness. For the performance of its actions, the mind depends on the motor or sensory organs as its direct agents. Efferent and efferent nerves, in their turn, act as direct agents of these organs. The nerves, which convey the tanmatras from objects to the mind, or activate the object with the force they acquire from the mental structure, and in this way link the mind with the external objectivities, are the indirect agents of the mind. Whenever the outgoing tanmatras carrying mental force get reflected, the objects come within our scope of sensation, perception, and conception. When they get refracted, the objects partially come within our scope of sensation, etc. When a tanmatras are neither reflected nor refracted, or when there is little reflection or refraction, the objects do not come within the scope of our feeling.
Okay, thank you. So let's go through this sentence by sentence, more or less. So consciousness is the supreme subjectivity. So it means that consciousness is the subject of everything and we are the object. So like Atman is the subject of our mind, and then Paramatman is the subject of the cosmic mind, or the, of everything in the universe. And so all mundane subjectivities or objectivities are mere blendings of the absolute subjectivity. Means everything else is relative, and the pure consciousness is the supreme subject of everything. It is witnessing everything. Now here, next sentence is very interesting. Therefore, the mind is not an absolute entity either, but a transformed state of consciousness. So this sentence is important because normally we identify with our mind, and so we enjoy things, and we take the mind as the absolute entity. Like we will normally think that this mind is everything. But he says here, the mind is not an absolute entity, but a transformed state of consciousness. And we'll go into the details of it later. But basically, in the evolution of in the creation of the universe, the mind is created out of matter, and so the mind is subtler than matter, and but it is part of the creation, and so as such, the mind will also undergo metamorphosis. It's changing all the time, but the consciousness is unchanging. So because the mind is always changing, it is not an absolute entity. Now, for the performance of its action, the mind depends on the motor and sensory organs as its direct agents. So this is important. Like when we meditate, we try to withdraw from our motor and sensory organs. But the mind needs the motor and sensory organs to act. And also the nerves which connect to those organs. Now, after that, he starts to go into a topic which is called tanmatra. And so tanmatras, they are basically, the tanmatras, they are the minute particle of a certain bhuta or fundamental element. So today we'll be mostly explaining about tanmatra, because that's a whole topic in itself. So the tanmatras, they are basically like, let's say, like a practical example. You perceive an object. Now you can perceive the object in many ways. Like let's say it is food, then you can smell it, you can see it, it has color, the food is very tactual, and so the food is solid. Well, it can be liquid also, but you will see the food and you will be able to perceive it in a very um, full way. Whereas, let's say if you want to see the air, you don't see right through, you see right through it. And that's why he's saying that sometimes when there's little reflection or reflection, the objects do not come within the scope of our feeling. So like air, we normally cannot see it. And many things are maybe too small or too big, so we cannot see it. Now, here, this book is called The Spiritual Philosophy of Sri Anandamurti, and it's written by Didi Mitra about 30, 40 years ago. It still remains a very good book, although it's a little bit outdated, but mostly it's still very valid. So here, when we have the Tanmatras, we basically have 5 Tanmatras, or 5 types of, so we have the sound, and so that's representing the ethereal factor, which is represented by the Vishuddha chakra. And then you have sound and touch, or sparsha, which is related to the aerial factor. So like, let's say air, you can, like if you blow on your finger, you can feel it with a touch, and so it can carry sound, and you can also feel it by your touch. And so that's called sparsha in Sanskrit. And then you have luminous factor, which is represented by the Manipur chakra, or the chakra controlling our digestions at the navel point. So that can carry sound, touch, and form. So the light, once you have light, you can actually see the form. And so that is the rupa. Now liquid, then you can have sound, touch, form, and taste, or rasa. So like you can taste something. Liquid, you can drink it, you can taste it. And if something is liquid, it also has a form. You can also touch it, and sound can carry through it, but less easily than through the air, for example. And then you have solid, and the solid has sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. So like something solid, you can smell it. And so the tanmatras are the minute inferences that emanate from that object. So like, for example, smell, there will be some atoms, there will be some smell particles coming to your nose. And then, the nose will carry it to the, I think, olfactory nerve or whatever nerve, and then carrying that to the brain. And so same way, so the taste, the tongue is the one, actually tongue and nose is the one that where you taste. You taste salty, sweet, etc. with the tongue, but the finer aspects of our taste is through the nose. And so, so in this way, these are the tanmatras. And so like, let's say it's easy to understand from the luminous factor that your eyes, they get the reflection of light from objects. And that's how we can see objects. So we can see form of objects because the light is reflected on the objects. Now, if it is completely dark, there's nothing reflecting and we cannot see. And so in this way, the different tanmatras, they represent the 5 Buddhas, or the 5 fundamental factors which are present in the whole universe. And and we perceive through those tanmatras. So does it make any sense? Do you have any questions about that? I know it sounds a little abstract. I want to also present you to another book, which is it's called The Conscious Universe, a commentary on Sri Sri Anandamurti's and the Sutram. This book is very good. It is written by Brother Devashish. It's available for $5 on Amazon in the Kindle. And so in this book, you can just search here. So like, let's say you search for Tanmatra, and then you get different references to the Tanmatras. And so Devashish, he explains it in a very nice way, and he connects it to science and to also the different other references historically in the Vedic tradition. And so we could read a passage from this just so you understand how this text is. Okay, so maybe Arya, maybe you can are you able to see this clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so if you can just read the, here, this, it is through the Tanmatras.
Okay. It is through the tanmatras that we recognize of Bhutas, from which the objects of perception are formed. Since the ethereal factor carries one tanmatra, aerial factor 2, luminous 3, liquid 4, and solid 5, we can determine that the Bhuta of an object, or substance according to the tanmatras it emanates, as long as we bear in I can't see, bear in, bear in mind that we are only capable of perceiving a tiny fraction of the waves that reaches our senses. If the frequency of a sound is too high or too low, for example, we will be unable to perceive it without the help of a special instrument that amplifies our receptive capacity, such as the hearing aid, and even such instruments are subject to their own limitations. The same is true if a sound is too loud or too soft. Likewise, our eyes can only apprehend a minute portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. The fact that something appears invisible, a protist, for example, doesn't mean that it is invisible per se, only that our naked eye cannot perceive the form tanmatra emanated by the protist without the aid of a microscope. When those light waves are magnified, then we can indeed see that protist with our eyes. Be that as it may, we can apply our knowledge of tanmatras to that portion of the world that we are able to perceive, either with or without the help of scientific instruments.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think you see, this book is explaining things in a very nice way, and it goes into the science of it and also in the history. For example, in the previous one, it goes into comparing it to Kapil, Samkhya philosophy, and some other philosophies. And so this book is nice. It's a good reference book. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the original text. Thank you so much, Arya. Okay, then, so do you understand more or less what is Tanmatra now? Okay, all right, good. So then now mental force is required. So our mind has force, and so we'll go later into that. But basically, Sri Shanamurti, he says that the mind has ectoplasm, and so the ectoplasm is like the mind stuff in a way. And so when we receive something, that is through the chitta, or the functional part of the mind, which is the expression of the objectivity. Okay, let's read a little bit, continue reading. So maybe Swasti, you can read next. You can read the next two paragraphs.
The correctness, it starts.
Yeah.
The correctness of perception depends upon a good many factors. The objects transmitting matters must be in healthy condition. The gateways of the organs must be healthy, and also the reflecting tanmatras should be defectless. The afferent and efferent nerves and the chitta should be sufficiently strong and active, and the last but not least factor is that the ego, aham tattva, should be ready to receive them. Any defect or slackness of any of the above factors results in incorrect perception and hence in incorrect conception. For example, in the case of persons suffering from glaucoma, watery fluid is deposited in the optical nerve, which causes a dispersion of light inside. As a result, even the white rays transmitted by objects appear to be spectrum-colored. So far as the afferent nerves are concerned, it is primarily upon the activating capacity of the ego that the process of physical activity depends. One's personality also depends on the activating radiating capacity. The more developed is the radiating power, the more glaring will be one's personality.
Okay, thank you. So this is more or less a continuation of the same. Here he mentions the ego, or the ahang tattva. So like, let's say if you are not interested in something, you may not even see it. So the mind has to be ready to receive the inferences. I mean, you might have experienced it, that you walk into a room and someone is watching TV and they don't even look up, you know, they just, they ignore you. And so the mind has that capacity to ignore something. And that's basically what we use when we meditate. We choose to ignore the external inferences. And so when we meditate, we are trying to direct our mind away from these tanmatras that are coming in all the time. So like, let's say you are sitting and meditating and there's maybe a fly sitting on your nose, or or there's a mosquito biting your leg, or you know, someone drives past, or someone slams the door, or someone opens the window, and like all of these things, they would normally distract us in the meditation. And so when we get good at meditating, those things, they, well, generally don't bother us. Of course, there are some things which are just terribly irritating and very hard to, like, let's say a fly goes into your ear, or you know, a fly starts biting your eyelid or something. I mean, like, you will not be able to, the hands will just automatically move, you know. So sometimes now that is that we'll go into that later more, which part of the body is acting. So like sometimes the minds just move automatically. You don't need to think anything. And so that's part of the kosa, which is controlling the body. or the Kamamaya kosa. Okay. Any questions so far on this? Nope. All right. Then let's move on. We are now coming in the next paragraphs. We'll be coming to the actual kosas. So let's read on. So maybe Nilima, can you read? If you can read maybe the next 3 paragraphs.
Okay, so far as the efferent nerves are concerned, it is primarily upon the activating capacity of the ego that the process of physical activity depends. One's personality also depends on the activating radiating capacity. The more developed is the radiating power, the more glaring will be one's personality. Thus, it has been examined that the function of the mind is to act through the organs and nerves, and thereby either to receive or radiate the tanmantras. The portion of the mind which deals with indriyas is named Kamamaya kosha. This Kamamaya kosha controls the physical longings of the microcosms. As regards to the macrocosm, the mind is said to be started at the stage where the sense of subjectivity, mahatattva, the subjectivated I, tattva, and the objectivated I, shita, are all present. Hence, in the stage of shita, we get mahatattva and aham tattva as well.
Okay, so here we come to something very interesting, and I think this is something I would definitely need to maybe go deeper into before next class. But here he is saying one's personality depends on the activating or radiating capacity. The more developed is the radiating power, the more glaring is one's personality. So I think this is probably related to the chitta, as I was talking about the ectoplasm. So the ectoplasm is the mind, and so the mind, like if the mind is well developed and you have like a high intuitional power, you'll be like shining. And so that, I think that's what he calls glaring personality, or ojas. It is something we experienced when we were in training center. The trainees, when they would come to Stockholm from after being in Sweden in the actual training center, their faces were really shining because they have been doing a lot of meditation and living a very pure lifestyle. And so he might be talking about something like that. I'm not sure. I will need to research it more. Now, yeah, but he does talk about receiving or radiating tanmatras. So it means that the mind can also radiate tanmatras. Now, for example, if the ectoplasm is very strong and very developed, the mind can actually create a perception in someone else's mind. So let's say, for example, with like magicians, they can, let's say there is someone that, he creates the image that there's a rope and the rope starts rising up and then he climbs up the rope, and so everyone around him will be amazed, like the rope is rising up and then the person climbs up the rope. It's impossible, right? And it's actually not happening. It's just the person is meditating or concentrating his mind, and he is creating that image in the mind of everyone surrounding him. And so he is able to radiate tanmatras. He is able to make them see something that is not real. And so I think that might be what he referring to here, to radiate the tanmatras. So tanmatras, they, in other words, you have a perceiving capacity, you also have a radiating capacity. It's both ways. Now, the portion of the mind which deals with indriyas is called kamaya kosha. This kamaya kosha controls the physical longings of the microcosm. So this is the first stage of the mind, the kamaya kosha. The body is also called annamaya kosha, and in the classical literature, it was called annamaya kosha and pranamaya kosha. But and so now here, this sentence here, talking about the macrocosm. So there is also a mind behind the creation, and so that mind is called the cosmic mind. So, like, let's say you just start to observe, think, like, how could this creation work without some mental power? Like, our body works because we have a mind and we have mental power, which is controlling the bodily function. Once we die, the mind goes out and we cannot control anymore our mental function. I have like a whole lot of mosquitoes swirling around me. I'm just gonna move inside. Just give me 1 second. I have like a cloud of mosquitoes because it's just that time of the day. So I hope I don't lose connection. Okay, I escaped the mosquitoes. All right, so and so the cosmic mind also has Mahat, Ahang, and Chitta, as well as our mind. And so we'll go into that a little bit more next time. I want a little bit show you from the book about the Conscious Universe book, because that one has a very nice chapter on the Kosas. I feel the Kosas chapter there is very well written. So now if I want to find this, I just go to Kosa. Type here Kosa. It will take me to there. Well, it does depend on the internet, so it's slow. Okay, got it. So here this is another book. The Anda Sutram is another book, which was written around the same time like Indiana ideology. So they are complementary. It's best to read together Anda Sutram, Indiana ideology, and also the commentaries on Anda Sutram, which is the one by Devashish, the Conscious Universe, as well as the one by Didhyana Mitra, which is out of print, but it's available in a PDF download. So in Anda Sutram, Sri Shanamurti, he takes like one sentence in Sanskrit to express a deep truth. So like, for example, this one is Pancha Kosatmika Jaivi Shata Kadali Pushpavad, which means that the living being is composed of 5 sheaths like a banana flower. And then Devashish, he goes into explaining the history of it. That is about 3,000 years old idea, but and how that was. And then he explains how Sri Shanamurti explained those things in a new way. So the first layer is the Kamaya Kosa, and the second one is the Manomaya Kosa. And then you also have the Annamaya Kosa, which is the physical body. And the reason why the physical body is not part of the kosas is because like you drive a car, the car is not part of you. In the same way, we are driving this body, and the body is not I. And so the body is our vehicle, but the body is not our mind. Although the body does have the Kamaya Kosa controls the body, and that's why the body also has intelligence. So like sometimes in kinesiology, we observe that the mind has a better intelligence than our subconscious mind, because the mind knows what it wants, and it's not influenced by, taste, or like if something is, looks great, or, like let's say you want to eat a pizza because you like the taste of the pizza, but the body may or may not like it. Or you want to eat candy, because the color is nice and the taste is nice, but the body may or may not want it. And so the body has its own intelligence. And that intelligence is the Kamaya Kosa, and it controls the instincts of the body and controls the body. Now it also controls the perceiving part, and that's why Sri Shanamurti starts the chapter by explaining about the tanmatras, because the Kamamaya Kosha is directly engaging with those tanmatras, directly engaging with those inferences. And whereas the Manomaya Kosha, which is the next layer, is more contemplative mind. And so in this chapter, he explains nicely the difference between these kosas, and like sometimes we call it conscious mind, subconscious mind, and unconscious mind, whereas the Sri Shanamurti was referring a crude mind for the Kamaya Kosha, and subtle mind for the Manomaya Kosha, and causal mind for the other kosas. So so let's read here a little bit about the Manomaya Kosha, and then we can call it a day. So maybe if someone else is able to read, Chris, I don't know, you're at work, maybe you cannot read, right? Yeah, probably. So maybe Arya, maybe you can read just here, a little bit down this one.
Sure. Starting at the next kosa?
Yeah.
Okay. The next kosa, ascending the ladder of subtlety, is the Manomaya kosa, and its witnessing consciousness is called Tejasa. Mana means mind, thus Manomaya kosa can be translated as the mental layer, i.e. the thinking mind. Its principal activities are thinking and memory. It is characterized by mental content that is not directly dependent on the senses or the tanmatras. It is the domain of intellection and imagination, and it draws its propulsive force from artha and dharma, psychic desire and psycho-spiritual desire. Anandamamurti calls it the subtle mind, to differentiate it from the crude mind, but it is sometimes translated as subconscious mind. And while this is not entirely accurate, it is useful in certain contexts, especially as regards its relationship with Kamamaya Kosa and Manamaya Kosa develops from the Kamamaya Kosa in the process of evolution. And it can be seen to some degree in the higher animals who are able to think thoughts that are not directly dependent on their senses. The most obvious examples of this are dreaming, which can be seen in dogs, primates, and the higher marine mammals, such as dolphins, porpoises, and whales, but is also evidenced by the presence of memory in developed animals and the rudiments of intellectual processes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
And so, and then he goes on explaining how they interact, the Kamaya and the Manamaya. Like, let's say you're going to a jazz concert, and so you may be directly engaged just listening to the music and perceiving all of that, or you might shift to more contemplating, like the music may remind you of something that you've heard before, or you may start daydreaming, or like so we normally shift between the Kamaya and the Manamaya kosha throughout our day, but those two kosas are the most active during our daytime and nighttime as well, the Kamaya and the Manamaya kosha. Okay, so I think we can maybe, I'm gonna stop the recording now. And so we'll continue with this topic on next week for the other koshas.